What's up everybody? Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video of mine, but it's not going to be a story time, it's somebody else's story, but I really wanted to talk about it. If you were born in the 90s, you probably already know what's up. You know why I'm dressed the way that I am and who I am. If you're not, I'm about to tell you one of the creepiest, most cursed movie sets that you will ever hear about. If you're new here to my channel, what's up? My name is Nikki. I tell story times here as well as true crime and anything creepy crawly. So if you guys like any of those genres, definitely subscribe. I would love to have your fine ass here. As I'm filming this, it is October 22nd. Literally yesterday was the reporting of an untimely, unfortunate death of a really talented producer that was on the set of a movie called Rust that was being filmed in New Mexico. One of the headliners of the movie was Alec Baldwin, and he was the one who actually shot the prop gun that ultimately took this director's life. Now, I would like to have like a moment of silence or a moment of recognition for her. Her name was Halyna Hutchins, and she was taken to the hospital, and about 3 hours later, she was pronounced dead, and she had a very untimely death at a very, very young age. I just want to take this moment to really recognize her life and her accomplishments. Also, Joel Souza, who was the actual director of the movie, the head director, he was also injured during this time as well. The investigation is still going on. People are still kind of getting their information on the site and everything. No charges have been filed at this moment. But when I heard about this story, it reminded me about a story that I was literally obsessed with at a very young age that happened in the 90s. This movie was such a huge part of my childhood, and I wanted to share some of my theories with you, my thoughts, and some of the things that I've been thinking about since I was literally like 6 years old. So let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about a 1993 film by the name of The Crow. The Crow was based off of a comic book from back in the day. They took, you know, some little things here and there from this comic book and created it into a film. To get started, we're going to talk about the headlining actor. We're going to be talking about Brandon Lee. To some of you, his last name might be familiar. So he was born to his parents, Bruce Lee and Shannon Lee Caldwell, which I'm sure you definitely know Bruce Lee. So we are going to be talking about his son and what happened and the mysterious events behind it and some of the conspiracy theories associated with it. Bruce Lee in himself is an icon, very talented in the art of martial arts, and he did a ton of movies. He was very successful, but he did pass away at a very young age. He actually passed away whenever his son Brandon Lee was 8 years old. Brandon experienced loss of his father at a very early age, and you know, he had a pretty good relationship with his dad according to the media. He did have a few interviews later on in life saying that, you know, his dad was not a god, because a lot of people really idolize Bruce Lee. Even now, I'm sure that a lot of us really look up to Bruce Lee. I know that I always did as a child, but Brandon was very much upfront about the fact that his father was not a god. He actually had a very quick temper and he hated mediocrity. So that tells me that Brandon had a lot of pressure put on him because of the fact that not only was he Bruce Lee's son, he was Bruce Lee's only son. Brandon Lee was born on February 1st, 1965, an Aquarius such as myself. He was actually born in Oakland, California. Of course, he had one sibling that was Shannon Lee as well. They grew up in California, and because of that, he definitely was exposed to his father's lifestyle as well as his father's career path. After Bruce Lee died, Brandon went ahead and followed in his father's footsteps and continued his love and his training in martial arts and became very, very good at that. And he also decided to study at Emerson College and the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film School. He was studying for acting because he really wanted to be in movies and film just like his father, and kind of passed on his father's legacy. The beginning of Brandon's career really started in around 1986, where he was casted in a Hong Kong film called Legacy of Rage. This was his first film. You know, it was kind of a smaller film, but he was kind of getting his toes wet in the acting world. After that, he also appeared in about 2 seasons of the 1970s spin-off show of Kung Fu. And of course, it's called Kung Fu. The premise is martial arts. He's Bruce Lee's son. So, you know, he did this job as well for most of the 80s. After this, he did get a few roles with Warner Brothers and Century Fox. Smaller movies like Showdown and Little Tokyo and Rapid Fire that were released in the late 80s and early 90s. Now, these movies, they didn't really score well in the box office. One of them was actually straight to VHS, which, you know, is obviously not as great as getting on the big screen. And the other one did make it to the big screen, but it didn't really sell a whole lot. The movie critics definitely were not huge fans of these films. However, they always gave Brandon props for his appearances in these movies, his role in these movies, and saying that he individually did a really great job, and the movies that he was in kind of flopped. Until fate kind of did a 180. 1993, where the press found out that he had been casted as a headliner for a new movie called The Crow. Now, keep in mind, we didn't have as many movies back then that were based off of comic books, not nearly as much as we do now. My childhood was not as blessed, okay? So when The Crow came out based off of this comic book, it was like a huge fucking deal. And the fact that Bruce Lee's son was headlining this movie, okay? So 1993 comes around and they start production of The Crow. Now, just a little synopsis, if you have not seen the movie, I would really highly suggest that you watch it. Just a trigger warning, there are a lot of topics that are talked about in this movie, including suicide, rape, murder, and some other acts of violence that may trigger you, so definitely keep that in mind. The synopsis of the movie, without giving you any spoilers, is about a young rock band member, and he is a musician. He ends up dying, and he is revived and brought back from the dead by a supernatural crow. The crow brings him back from the dead and also gives him supernatural abilities. Think Catwoman on steroids, okay? He is brought back to Earth after dying to avenge his own death as well as the death of his fiance, who was brutally to death by a city street gang that was terrorizing the entire neighborhood and that killed both he and his fiance. He was brought back from beyond to handle business. Brandon Lee is extremely dedicated to this role. I think that he felt, I can't even imagine how he felt. He must have felt a lot of pressure, like being Bruce Lee's son, like that's a lot of fucking pressure. But he was a hard worker. He lost so much weight for this role. He put himself on an insane diet, on an insane training schedule. He still practiced his martial arts, but he also asked for a specific choreographer that was going to help him with like the fighting scenes and how he was going to navigate those. So they ended up trying to find a combination that wasn't as known to the masses. So they mixed Brandon Lee's martial arts knowledge with this choreographer's aerobics knowledge, and they kind of created a mesh of the two so that he, during his fighting scenes and during like the violence of it all, that Brandon Lee kind of had this supernatural effect to him where like he didn't move like a normal human. So they practiced for hours and hours and hours on end. Brandon Lee was extremely devoted to this role, so much so that, you know, when the movie opens up, it shows him reviving from the dead. At the time of filming, it was already cold as hell outside. Brandon Lee decided to take an ice bath before every scene in order to really give off the coming back from the dead without a shirt, without no shoes, just in the middle of nowhere in the cold, for this movie. So the directors and producers were so smitten with him and impressed by him because he was really dedicating himself to this role. Fast forward, this was supposed to be about a 2-month to 2.5-month production time. Brandon gets through all of these scenes and all of these filming days, and we get to March 31st, 1993. There's only 8 days of production left, but Brandon specifically only had 3 days of production left with his character, and the rest could be done without him. So he was like right at the tail end. He goes to set and he is set to film a scene that comes more towards the end of the movie that really does have a lot to do with why he is the way that he is, the crow, his supernatural abilities, which is also to avenge his fiance's death, which was brutal and terrible. This last scene required Brandon Lee to walk into his apartment. He would see his fiance being beaten and raped by gang members. Brandon Lee walks into the room in the scene as he was instructed to. One of the gang members that was played by actor Michael Massey, he actually had I'm gonna read it off because I don't know things like this, okay? He was set to fire a Smith & Wesson Model 629 44 Magnum revolver at Brandon as he walked into the room. This gun was not just a prop, it was real, okay? A ton of movie sets and directors, they use real guns that way. They're not supposed to be a danger to any of their actors or staff, so they did have a real revolver, but this revolver was loaded with improperly made dummy rounds, and these dummy rounds hit Lee directly in the stomach. During this scene, Brandon was supposed to fall forward. Whenever he got shot, he was supposed to fall forward, but he fell backward. So the director and, all of the other people on the crew, they were very confused as to why Brandon fell backward instead of forward. The director immediately cut and he called out at Brandon and was like, that you were supposed to go forward, like, Brandon, get up. And Brandon didn't answer him and wasn't moving and wasn't like giving any signs of life. So they waited a few seconds and they started to get concerned. Everyone started crowding around him. At first, his pulse was normal, but within 2 to 3 minutes, his pulse started slowly declining until it was virtually gone. After flying him to a nearby hospital, Brandon Lee underwent 6 hours of emergency surgery. He was pronounced dead on March 31st at 1:03 p.m. and he was only 28 years old at the time. After that, he was then transported to be buried next to his father, Bruce Lee, at the Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle, Washington. It was an accident, and it's very, 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 very similar to what happened with Alec Baldwin and the director of photography while he was filming. This is not the first time that this has happened on movie sets. And I know that a lot of my followers, a lot of my glamazons are very creative individuals. Some of you guys want to be writers, psychiatrists. Some of you guys want to be actors. I think that it would behoove you to be very, very cautious of any film that you may be involved in that may have guns or firearms involved, because sometimes the props are not properly prepared and it could cost you your life. This is not the first time. What happened with Alec Baldwin and Halyna Hutchins is not the first time that this happened, and it has taken other lives, including Brandon Lee's life at a very young age. So what happened with Brandon actually all ties in together with a conspiracy theory. It's very similar to like the Superman conspiracy theory, where they're like the men that are a part of the Lee family and they die young, they die on set. There's also another conspiracy theory in regards to Brandon Lee's death. Some people believe that an outsider was jealous of Brandon Lee's success because he did get into the movie industry pretty easily in the eyes of other actors and people that were really, really struggling to get into this field. Some people felt like Brandon had you know, just handouts given to him, and he was given special treatment because of who his father was. He had been in films and these films flopped or they went straight to VHS, and the only reason why people were being nice to him was because he was Bruce Lee's son. There was some contentious behavior, there was some jealousy, so some people think that there may have been somebody that was on the staff of this set that really low-key hated Brandon Lee, hated the fact that he was favored by Hollywood, and you know, they described him as being coddled and being given everything, even though Brandon Lee was an extremely hard worker, and you know, he was really dedicating himself specifically to this role. This person may have felt like he had things too easy, and they set everything up with the props to ensure that he would not make it out of this scene. I definitely want your guys' thoughts. Let me tell you something. My mom loved this fucking movie. She had The Crow on repeat. I knew that movie by heart. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of history about some of the weird things that happen in Hollywood, especially with props. So I was really sad to hear about what happened with Alec Baldwin and his photography director. Bless her heart. I hope that her family is well. Brandon Lee's family released a statement after this happened because they could definitely relate. So of course, keep these two families in your prayers and in your thoughts. But I wanted to kind of give you guys a synopsis of the Lee conspiracy. If you're not subscribed to my channel, I would love to have your fine ass be a part of my family. Definitely hit that subscribe button. Here are my socials so you can keep up with Nikki on your days off. And of course, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to chill with me. And thank you for learning about one of my most favorite movies of all time. I love you guys so much, and I will see your fine ass in my next video. Peace out, y'all.